everybody. This is ManTalk. This is Todd Hayen here. And we got a little clip we'll play for you in a minute. Before we do that, I just wanted to throw up our email addresses in case anybody wants to write directly to either one of us. We are open to seeing clients. If anybody's so inclined to check that out, we can certainly do that. And we do it remotely and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. So anyhow, here's my email address if anybody wants to write directly to me. And I will certainly respond to you. Just give you a second to write that down. Our websites are also displayed during the whole process, so you can certainly get in touch with us through our websites. And this is William's email address. And we'll get going on this thing in a minute. William, you want to say hello?
Hello. Welcome to the show. 5 minutes, a good one.
That's good.
A good clip. I like it.
Yeah. Sex is always a good topic. And not sure what the title of this is going to be, but it's going to be something like The Importance of Sex or something to that regard.
It's called Sex, Money, Power. We'll get lots of hits.
Sex, Money, Power? Yeah, of course. That is what it's all about, isn't it? Right. Okay, let me play this, and I got to apologize. I think her name is at the bottom of the screen. I believe it is, and if it isn't, I'll put it in the notes. I'm not sure who this is, but she has some interesting things to say, so we'll just play it and go from there.
If a man came home from work one day and said, you know what, I just don't really feel like spending quality time with you anymore. You know, when I come home, I'm going to play my video games, maybe go out with my buddies, have a beer, but I just don't really feel like quality time. And, you know, we're not going to go on dates anymore. I'm just kind of done with that season of my life, you know. We would call that man deeply neglectful, and most of our society would probably tell that woman to leave him. And yet, when a woman is going through legitimate hormonal changes and simply decides to take sex off the table, somehow we tell men to just get over it. Here's the problem. Women, you don't realize that for a man, sexual intimacy is how he connects with your soul. And when you take it off the table, a part of him dies inside. He feels like the love of his life is being ripped away from him. It is not a bodily function that he has to just deal with on his own. It is how he feels like he's one with his wife. So when you remove that, you are destroying your relationship one moment at a time. We as women have to learn and understand this. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean he shouldn't be loving and gentle and tender towards this transition hormonally that you are in. But to remove it completely simply because you are feeling different is selfish. Just like we would call that man selfish for neglecting his wife.
Well, that's a load of information there. I think one of the first things that I would say, and I didn't notice this the first time, she's really talking more about like women going through a menopausal change as they get older. And I think this doesn't just apply to that time. I think it applies all the way through a relationship because, you know, we do see, certainly I see in my clients that there is a difference between the desire for sexual intimacy. Usually there's always outliers to these things. Yeah. So I'm not making a blanket statement, but usually it's more acute with men than it is with women. The frequency, the quality, and you know, there's all kinds of things that get in the way of that. I mean, children and you know, mothers going through the mother phase of their life and their focus is more on their kids or even on their career or something like that. So it isn't just a hormonal change. And I'll let you say something about this, William. And I got another thing I wanted to make clear in my thinking, at least, that this little clip is assuming that everybody is psychologically healthy and that the men are not abusive and are not causing other issues that would cause their wife or their partner to reject sex or not be interested in it. So it's making that assumption. I mean, you know, women are much more attuned, again, bell curve stuff, are much more attuned to the behavior of their partner and the psychological presentation to them in order to want to engage sexually than men are. And that's, again, a broad statement. But anyhow, go ahead. Let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, she says something interesting, as she sets it up. And, she's talking about women legitimately going through hormonal changes, which, yeah, is definitely a reference to perimenopause, And, it's interesting how she goes on to sort of, she doesn't really go into that bind. So the bind being when estrogen and progesterone are crashing, the bodily changes that you're going through, they basically make it really hard to not just be receptive sexually, and to have any kind of arousal state. Your libido drops, but also disagreeableness is through the roof. So your partner is constantly navigating that as well. And so in the one hand, so she goes then over that into, okay, so we have to recognize what the effect will be on men should that be taken off the table. We can't have sex anymore. It's not going to work for me because of what's happening in my body, what's happening in my mind. But she kind of skips over that point, which is that, right, yes, while recognizing that men are going to feel like their soul is fucking ripped out of them. And I think that's what I love about this clip, is like that she's honoring that.
Yes,
a lot of people don't get it. And I'm saying, because like, it's not just that women don't understand this because they're not male bodied for the most part.
Right.
But like even men don't seem to understand.
No, I don't think men understand it either.
No.
Right.
But let's just address that bind.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, what's to be done? How do you become sexually generous with your partner when you're in a state of perimenopause? And it's going to be hard. It's going to really be hard. You're going to really have to work on it. And it's going to be difficult for you to be in a place of what we call a full-bodied yes, right? To be fully in enthusiastic consent. But you can be in willing consent, and you can work within those parameters. But it does take a lot of dialogue. The way that I think that male-bodied partners can really show up for this and participate in the necessary reciprocity to make this work is that men need to understand perimenopause. And when I say understand it, I don't mean watch a fucking video about it. Mm-hmm. I don't mean read some fucking chicken soup for the soul bullshit book on the shelf from Indigo. I mean really go into what's happening at not just a physiological level, but on a spiritual level and an emotional level as well, right? Because it's really, really hard. And when a woman sees that a man is taking the effort to really understand on a deep level what's happening for her, it creates this reciprocity for her. Now she can more easily be in willing consent to meet his sexual needs when her body is not fully receptive and her mind is not fully there. So I just want to that first, because I think it's like, I love what she's saying, but we can't just skip over that one piece where you, oh yes, legitimately your body is going through that, but get over that, ladies. It's almost like she sets women in the same trap that men get set in.
No. I know. And it's a 2-minute clip or whatever. And she's not going to, even if she knows it, she's not going to go into that kind of detail. But essentially what you're saying here is, I think the key to all of this is that, we can be connected or be aware of connection through things other than sex and other than even the things that women are looking for as far as listening and understanding and that kind of thing. But the sexual part of it is almost like it's a reinforcement. It's like if you really have a great desire, say to drive a car fast, okay, and you never get in one and never drive it, you're only going to reach that fulfillment through fantasy and through an abstract connection with whatever that compulsion and desire is psychologically to drive a car fast. Obviously people deal with this all the time. There are people that wish they were great athletes or whatever, and they're not, and they fantasize over it. You can fantasize that you're in a very deep romantic love relationship with your partner, a very soul connected relationship. But if there's no physical attribute to that, because we are physical beings and we're designed to get pleasure out of the sexual connection. And we can say that women, as she's describing, say through a hormonal thing or through a variety of other things, don't have that desire. They still will have a desire, at least from a fantasy perspective, of being romantically engaged with their partner. They have a different language for that, very possibly. Not all of them do, but, broad stroke wise, they do. They have a different method for achieving that romantic compulsion.
Mhm.
Where men, it's primarily the sexual act, just like we're talking about. I know I'm not really being clear as to what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
but
maybe I can help.
yeah, do you know what I'm
I
getting
do. I hear you loud
at?
and clear, brother. I'm with you.
Okay,
Yeah.
go for it, Bob.
Yeah, sure. You're right. I think the last piece that you're looking for there is that women, they seek connection. They want to feel connected.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and one of the places that, you know, women, female-bodied people can help to connect on that level is, it's not about necessarily you feeling sexual arousal, giving it or receiving it, but it's about, you know, in that moment you're very deeply connected. And you know that the alienation that you find in the experience of perimenopause can be alleviated by that sense of connection, even if you're not aroused in that moment. You know,
That can I say one thing to that, because that's very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
The perimenopause thing that she's talking about, the loss of libido, the loss of sexual connection,
Mm-hmm.
is more biological, because obviously it's dealing with hormones, it's dealing with the physiological body. It doesn't, the menopause or anything should not affect the romantic compulsion, the compulsion to be intimate. Okay. And yet, anyway, I'm going off on a
I hear
tangent.
you.
I'm not.
You're right. It doesn't need to, but I mean, if you look at it from a spiritual level, what's happening here is that the dark feminine is getting its revenge. It's like, you know, you've been repressing me long enough. Disagreeableness and rage are like, I'm back. Motherhood is done. You know, the body has no more space for motherhood, and so now.
Can you hold that? I don't want to be offensive and rude to you, but that's a really, really important thing. You're going down a path now as to why, other than hormonal physiological changes, why is it that we see this so often, not just at menopause time of life, but we see it earlier as well with the whole toxic masculine sexual thing. I think we should go into that, but let's go into it after we've covered this part. Is that okay?
We're talking about it on a like a different level, like on an emotional level. Like what we're talking about is like what gets in the way of that. Like there's still potentially a desire for romantic connection. But on an emotional level, because of what's happening, you know, physiologically with the crash of hormones, is that it's just it makes women more disagreeable. They find that, like, you know, to their consternation, they're like, I can't believe it, but like, you know, it's like things rub me the wrong way. I get pissed off, I get annoyed, I get defensive and combative.
Well, that's a really important point to make, that it's not just about libido lessening, that it's physiologically, that it's also about this agreeableness and this quicker to anger, quicker to frustration, quicker to I don't want to be close to you, fucker, right now. Stay away from me. You're annoying me. I don't know, and you might know this. I don't know if that is something that once you hit that particular stage and your hormones are running that way or whatever, that it's 24/7. No. I don't think it is, from my experience. It comes and goes. It comes and goes. And again, that requires a man who is sensitive to it and understands what it is that's going on, and doesn't just become rejected by it and runs away from it. I can't get close to you. Sure. Intimate.
It's going to provoke a man's wounded parts, right? Because he's going to perceive it as rejection.
Exactly.
And if he's wounded in that way, it's gonna be hard for him to just be like in the awareness of, right, it's just that she's in a mood that's of her own, in her own space and got nothing to do with me. I'm just a sort of like unwitting sort of victim of this. She's I'm an obstacle. It's like a subject object thing. I become an obstacle to you. I want something here in the way. I'm no longer a subject in that exchange. And if you can recognize, it's not my subjective nature, it's my objective nature in your mind, we can pull out of feeling like we're taking it personally. But that's hard to do. And like a lot of this is like, I think this trouble arises like when you get to this point of a relationship, if presuming that you're in a long-term relationship with someone before you get to this point, a lot of your hard work in that relationship on yourself and with the relationship itself will be paying off. And a lot of like stuff that you've been neglecting is going to suddenly show up. One of the things, for female-bodied people when it comes to menopause is vaginal dryness and painful sex, right? If you cannot trust your partner to listen to your cues, faster, slower, stop, wait, give me a second, more lubrication, the more or less of that. If you can't trust your partner to like get out of his animal mind that wants to rush toward orgasm, and that he will be able to listen to you and take those cues, you're going to naturally have that block. And that's something that needs to be developed over time, that kind of communication, that listening, that ability to be there. And so I think that's probably another big point. It's like, well, I'd like to be able to be open to that with you, but my fear is that you're not going to be able to, I'm not going to be able to communicate, or I won't be heard in a way, and I'm going to wind up being in pain. Advocacy, too, that's going to be a difficult thing. A lot of women in middle age are really good at advocating in some ways, but in the sexual, because that's a part of the dark feminine that's not integrated. And a great book on this is it's called The Vital Spark, which is Elisa Marciano, I think. She's on the Jungian Life podcast, I believe. Anyway, she's got a great book on this. So really, I mean, a lot of these things are kind of coming to their head, and which is why it behooves both men and women to be to understand each other on a much deeper level. And to my point earlier, it's like these things are happening, like she says, on a soul level, spiritual level. They're much deeper, and if we don't attend to those things, it's going to be really hard to manage them.
Yeah, and there's an assumption here, and again, I think it's a valid assumption, because I do think this is happening from speaking to my own clients. Mm-hmm. And the assumption here is that it doesn't really matter that much that a man have this it's also that they don't necessarily understand it, and it doesn't really matter. And at the same time, you've got the reverse of that, where a man is like saying, you just don't care. It doesn't matter to you. Therefore, I'm going to just completely split off from this. Mm-hmm. A healthy relationship is one where even if a woman is going through periods of hormonally or whatever it is, that I don't really want to get into the sex thing every time it's obvious that you would like it. Mm-hmm. That she can also work around that as far as her love and her connection, finding it in the ways that works for her, and the partner does the same thing, and can come to a deeper connection without a sexual encounter, because they both desire it. They both desire the connection. So it's a give and take. I mean, it becomes a compromise here and there, not all the time. But, not to say that every one person gets their way all the time, what they feel comfortable with.
Yeah. I think a lot of times what you'll notice in later stages of relationship in heterosexual relationship is that, women will get a little conflicted about, the initial kind of bid for even like non-sexual physical intimacy. And, what's happening, if you listen carefully, is like, well, in my past, in our history, that's the kind of the beginning, and then it'll lead somewhere. You're going to become aroused and you're going to want more. Now, if I'm not open to that, if I feel like I can't be there for that, or I can't be in the place to be able to desire that, or be able to be in willing consent with you, but I'm not able to make that conscious to myself, I just reject the physical intimacy cue. Right. You start to kiss me a little deeper, and I go, oh, and I push you away. And he's like, what? And, it's like there's this little dance of like, well, I don't want this to go somewhere that because I can't meet that need for you. But what happens in that exchange, though, right, is that it blocks the capacity for non-sexual physical intimacy, which when, during perimenopause and later in life, even for men, when the libido starts to wane, is like, that's what's left.
Right. Right.
A lot of men, there's not a lot of sexually mature men. A lot of men, especially because of porn, are still so sexually immature that a lot of their libidinal instincts sexually are like coming right out of the trickster, right? Hypersexualized. It's about getting away with it. It's about, it's about pleasure. But it's not about being able to be in a place of open, mature reciprocity and communication. That takes a lot of development. And I think porn, for one thing, but also just a lack of work in men, make that really hard. And then women have to contend with that. You're to your point, you're presuming that this guy is like sexually mature enough, right?
Yeah, right.
Whereas you and I both know from working with plenty of men and knowing lots of them that women are dealing with men who are sexually immature. right? And so, of course, that's going to play a huge role in that.
A
So
huge,
right? You know, she's going to
role.
one more point there.
Yeah.
Man, you got to mature that sexual function, otherwise,
yeah,
you're not gonna get your needs met, not the way you want.
Yeah, if it's proper, if both people are properly integrated, whatever that is, you're not going to run into these kinds of things, you know. And it's a very simplistic presentation to just say that if a woman is going through menopause and she just doesn't feel like sex, she's going to not have it on the table anymore. I think there's a lot of other elements that come into that. Some of them are hers, you know, and then some of them are him. Just like you're saying, he's sexually immature, or he's abusive in some way, whether it's physical or verbal or whatever, is going to have an impact on her making the decision that sex is not on the table. I think it's more complicated than a woman just saying, well, I don't feel like it, so screw you, or not screw you. You know, it's I don't know if it's possible to really sit here and come up with all of the different scenarios, because it is a very nuanced part of relationship. You know, men may find their connection with their partner through sex, connection with the soul of their partner through sex, but women find it through one of the ways they find that connection is through the pleasure of their partner, and the fact that their partner is finding their connection with soul through sex, that becomes a connection for them. So whether they have the same libido that they would like fuck a snake if somebody held it for them, like a man would, you know, whether they have that or not is beside the point, because they become sexually aroused, sexually interested in their partner, because their partner finds so much value in that connection. I don't think, you know, the way she presents it too, that it's like an obligation to like say, oh, well, okay, I took sex off the table because I'm going through this hormonal situation. So, and he should understand that. So I took it off the table. But now after listening to this, okay, I'm going to have sex with him when he wants to have sex, but not really want to. I don't think that works either. I think if you treat sex as an obligation, and you're not getting that soul connection as a woman through that or through other things, but the sex just becomes part of the whole gamut of things and you know, you're not gonna accomplish it. Women can fake it if they're really not in the mood for it, and if they fake the sex part but not fake the love part, if the love part is still there and still sincere, the physical part doesn't have to. I mean, you know, we don't know if women actually have orgasms or not when they act like they are. There's all kinds of talk about that, where men, you know, you can tell there's a physical thing that happens. And I'm not saying women should go out there and fake orgasms. I'm just saying it's like, that's not really the issue. The issue is that a man feels desired. It's not even so much having the sex itself. It's that if he feels that she desires him, whether it be sexually or intimately or physically, holding or kissing or sex or whatever, that's the key issue. If he loses a sense of desire from his partner, she can have sex with him all the time and it's not going to work. At least that's what I've put together with a lot of my clients.
Yeah. You know, and I think when we look at, you know, how successful the work in the sacred sexual is, one of the things that it does immediately when you pull out of the recreational, the transactional, you start to focus on some fundamentals, like learning to take pleasure in giving pleasure. Yeah, right. In transactional sex, that's not a part of it. Right. And exactly. So once you can tune into that, and once and a lot of people need to be guided, you know, by ritual elders into that space, it kind of frees you up. And then to your point about this kind of bypass that's there, a woman doesn't need to be in enthusiastic full body yes consent. She can be in willing consent and be focusing on the pleasure in giving pleasure. Right.
Right.
And I think that's
Right.
probably a lot easier for.
Well, that's where it would be if we take again an assumption, which may not be true because we're not women, but if we take an assumption and let's make a scale of 1 to 10 that men find that intimate connection with women through sex at a 10, and let's say women as a broad bell curve thing is it at an 8.
Mhm.
Okay, so if we just make that assumption that there's a difference there, then the sexual act can become for her just what you said. I am giving him his 10 and I find a 10 pleasure
Mhm.
in that, giving him his 10. I find intimate soul connection with him because I'm giving him his 10.
Mhm.
And therefore I get a 10 too, but different through a different conduit.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, is that essentially what you're saying there too? Yeah.
Yeah, in the core of it is, I think, learning to pull out of the transactional nature. It's okay to be like, you can there. If you look at human sexuality, and the statistic around 10,000 sex acts per live birth, which is an indication that like the human sexuality is more than simply reproduction. I mean, if it was, we wouldn't be doing it 10,000 times for one live birth. And so the transactional recreational part of it is there. What's important to do is but also to have it grounded in this practice of it can also be about communication and intimacy and connection on a soul level, right? In order for us to get into that place though, and be there at a much deeper level, to your point, when a man doesn't have an integrated anima and he's putting that on women, his connection to the lover in any real way is through her. So when she retracts that and she says, I'm not going to give you any sexual intimacy, she's like, your direct line to the feminine within you is now blocked. And because he hasn't integrated that in himself, he's lost. He can't find that in himself. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, I mean, to my point, I mean, I think one of the things that we can take away from this is like the phenomenon that she's describing here in this issue really does bring to our awareness the need for us to do our work personally and within relationship and consciously, like to start that work early, because the minute you get to this point in your relationship, if you have not done that work, a lot of this stuff is going to wind up getting in the way. And then what happens is that both of you give up. It's just too much. Fine, we shut down. All we have left is the physical intimacy, and that is few and far between. And then you wind up like so many elder couples, these two solitudes. People that it's like a lot of people will talk about their parents in this way. They're like their parents that are older, right? If I ask my clients, how do you describe what mom and dad are like now? It's like not even roommates. It's like there are these two solitary beings that are lost in their own experience that kind of, as long as there's no friction, they just sort of part ways, but they're just living in their own worlds. Right. And they can do that, even, certain generations can do that sitting in the same room.
Yeah, and it's not a good thing. It's like I think the culture has made that into that's just the way it is kind of deal. Oh, when you get older, you just become that way. And if you don't do something about it, it may be a natural tendency to move into that. But again, the culture is not very intelligent when it comes to things like this. It's like people will go through these processes. They'll have their children will leave, and then they will go into this kind of this non whatever phase where there's absolutely no awareness of these things. You do have to nurture them in order to keep them alive. At least in this culture you do. And I think the only cultures maybe you didn't have to are no longer around. They're ancient and they're not even viable anymore. I mean, there might be some that are, but I don't know of any.
But this waning of libido for all that in that picture seems sort of bleak and troublesome. I mean, it's there for a reason. I mean, the waning of the libido is that when you no longer need to direct those energies towards sex, whether it be reproductive or recreational, it frees up those energies to go in the direction of the spiritual. And your spiritual, like that's what those years are supposed to be for. or developing yourself
right.
in that way in service
Right.
of the community. So I mean, and really, if you want to, we go into like what it means to be a functioning ritual elder. It's that I'm not distracted by my libidinal needs. In fact, I have an abundance of that, and I've done my work to develop it, and now I can give it back to the community by showing up and offering my wisdom, even on a basic level too. You know, the safety that you can feel with elder people, to be in their presence and to receive their medicine, is predicated on the fact that you know that there's, like, to a large extent, that for men, for example, their predatory sexual instincts have sort of waned, and it's much safer to be with an older man, you know, and be intimate with him and to receive his wisdom, because the likelihood that's going to trigger in him and cause abuse is diminished. So, you know, even on that fundamental level. But for the elder himself, I mean, it's a blessing if you can allow it to be, because you're finally freed. Leonard Cohen has that line. I think it's like something like, the beast won't go to sleep. It's like he wants it to go to sleep. It's like, please, I got spiritual work to do. Can my cock just sort of like take a minute off here, because I want to fulfill the function of ritual elder in my community, and that's getting in the way. You know?
Yeah. And I think if it wasn't, I mean, going back to the clip, I mean, if it wasn't, if it was held back the way she describes in the clip, whether it be the guy's fault or hers, and you don't have that soul connection with your partner through the years where the libido is at its highest strength, you won't be able to go into the mature elder like you're describing. It won't naturally come about, because the earlier times were not expressed properly. You know, things did not go down the way that they were supposed to.
Right.
There's so many things about all of this or this particular clip. It seems to me that the soul connection that the male loses in a relationship, if the female or whatever takes it off the table, is it's a last resort. It's like the last checkbox of a failing relationship. And I think there's so many things that would come before you would reach a point where a woman would do as she says in the clip. That, and I said this a minute ago too, the same kind of thing where it's like, well, I just don't feel like it. Take it off the table. There are issues that she's dealing with if she can do that. She's not having any kind of romantic compulsion. It doesn't mean if she has a romantic compulsion, if she's deeply in love with her partner still and wants to connect with him in a way that sex isn't right for her, she is still going to be engaged with him from a physical point of view, and enough that it probably would all work out in the long run. You know, they would have sex sometimes they wouldn't, sometimes they just cuddle and hold one another, sometimes they would just talk and listen, whatever. I think to reach the point she describes in this, there's an awful lot of junk that has to be in the system to start with. Before you reach this point, you know, disrespect, disregard, a non-committal, unfortunately we are obligated in our relationships. We're obligated to do particular things and how we treat our partners that we would not naturally do or choose to do. Sex shouldn't be one of them. I mean, just like I said earlier, sex should not be executed because it's an obligation, but intimacy, certain kinds of intimacy, certain ways to be, you know, men doing things with their partners or for their partners they would rather not do. I mean, all, and vice versa. Those are all obligations. And I think one of the things the culture is teaching us is that we shouldn't have any obligations for anything. We're not responsible for anything. It's like, you just do what you do, I do what I do, and you either accept it or you don't, and move on if you don't. It's like there's no effort.
Well, you're right. I mean, I think that the impulse behind what you're describing is a good one, because obligations really is another way of saying codependencies. Like, you know, the only thing that binds us together is that I feel like I need to be with you and you feel like you need to be with me. That's just, I'm depending on you, you're depending on me. You know, in terms of like abdication, that what the woman's describing in that clip is a woman whose queen has gone offline, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
That's what the male perceived it. And so
exactly.
one of the other problems that you're gonna get into in this situation is that when her queen goes offline, the warrior in him that's maintaining loyalty in that relationship is demoralized.
Yeah. Right.
And he goes, well, if there's no queen here, what am I staying loyal to? Because there's no connection here to the divine through this queen. So why would I be loyal? And in his demoralization, then the trickster comes up from the bottom and goes, well, I guess we'll cheat.
Yeah.
And then he goes out and he does something. He does something dishonest, and he cheats in some way, and whether it be energetically or full blown breaking of the relationship agreements, and then she feels gutted and betrayed.
Oh yeah.
And he's never, for most men, it's going to be really hard for him to have the language to explain to her and for her to get to the point of like, oh, your queen went offline and therefore my warrior was demoralized. And that's why
I've tried that
archetypal guidance in our lives.
Yeah, I've tried to explain it that way, and it sometimes it works, but
of course. As I always tell my clients, you don't need to explain things or even understand things in archetypal terms.
Mm-hmm.
You can whatever language makes sense to you can put on top of it. But yeah, I think that's a problem. And I'm not excusing men in their lack of loyalty, but we have to be honest that, if a man doesn't have anything to be loyal to in the queen, because she's abdicated her responsibilities. And again, not that like she's obligated to have sex with him, but obligated to maintain some level of intimate connection where he doesn't feel that, right?
Exactly.
Here is that like, even though you should not be compelled to have sex with someone, you're taking on the responsibility of noticing, yes, but if you take that off the table, there is going to be a reaction likely or possibly in him that you need to attend to. You can't just walk away and go, oh no, this is what she's saying in the clip. You can't just wash your hands and say, no, I abdicate the throne.
Yeah, and then go into the line we were talking about earlier of saying, well, sex shouldn't be that important to you. It's just a physical thing. Go whack off somewhere. Go look at some porn. Most women wouldn't suggest that to their partner, but still, just metaphorically, the same thing. It's like you don't need sex. It's a physical thing. It doesn't mean anything really. So why are you so bothered by it? Why do you feel that means I've gone offline? Again, I don't think it's just the sex. I think it's all this other stuff to go offline.
There's no substitute. You can't, I don't know to what extent, women are accepting of men using porn in a relationship. They feel like that's problematic. But like, look, even if you had a woman who didn't feel uncomfortable with that, you're in the realm of the hungry ghosts, man, because you're not going to get this illusion of connection.
No.
Your body gets flooded with dopamine and oxytocin for about 2 seconds, but you can never get enough of what you don't really need. And that's why the addictive lover in the masculine psyche, just keeps using it over and over again. I mean, never mind the dopamine cycle that you're in, but what he wants, you pointed it out, what he wants from her is to feel wanted, even on a deeper level, like needed. You know how many hear, thank you for what you've done. I appreciate it. I see all the effort that you've gone into. No, they come home exhausted and they get, why are you not present with me right now?
Mm-hmm.
And they go, because I'm still reeling from all of the, survival needs that I've been attending to, all of the foresight and planning and all of the worries and fears that I've had on my shoulders throughout the day. Mm-hmm. And it feels, they all feel unseen. The women feel unseen in their need for presence. An emotional connection at the end of the day.
Well, it's all about the horse before the cart kind of thing. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? It's like you could describe any of these situations where, well, who screwed up first? Who stopped providing what was required first? Because if one does, the other one will follow with that. Just like you're saying. I mean, at the worst case scenario, it ends up with with an affair going on, but the healthy way to go if your queen goes offline is to leave, to try to work it out, of course, but ultimately you don't cheat. You don't cheat on somebody. That's playing two sides of the coin at the same time. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And of course, nobody really knows. Huh?
That's your trickster, because your trickster says, fuck you. I bet you.
Oh, yeah, of course. That's why, just like you said, very appropriately, that it is the trickster that comes up that causes that. I can do anything. I can do this and that. I can have my wife and the mother of my children to come home to, and I can also go out and get all of this excitement and newness out of this other person. I can do both.
Mm.
And, it's fascinating if you work with a lot of men that do that. It's fascinating once they've come back, if they choose to come back, that they act as if they went insane. It's like they go, I have no idea why I thought I could do this. It makes no sense at all.
They were repressed and possessed by the trickster.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You made a good point earlier too. I want to bring that out because I think it was an excellent one. And I think what you were getting at was like what gets in the way. And I think good couples therapy always focuses on this first is ego. You say what came first, the cart or the horse? That's all ego shit. Yeah, that's all like, oh, I'm not the problem, you're the problem. No, I'm not the problem, you're the problem. It's we got to get into the I and thou space. We got to move past that. Because that's just what you'll get nowhere when it's like you go first. It's your fault. No, it's your fault. Pull out of that, and then there's hope. And I think a lot of what couples therapy, and one of the reasons why it's hard work, and why a lot of practitioners are kind of wary in it, and a lot of people are wonder about its efficacy, is if you got to spend months and months and months kind of getting out of that ego space in order to get the work done, you'll be exhausted before you get any progress, right? And I think, and this is an interesting thing for me. I mean, you've done couples therapy. I've never done it. I've always been, I think, a little wary of that because of the kind of hard work. But my guess would be, and you can tell me from your experience, that's kind of true, right? That if you got to go through all this money and time just to get out of your fucking ego, you won't see any kind of real progress before you're exhausted.
No, absolutely. And if you could do it, obviously wave the little magic wand that never seems to be there. It would be an insistence. If you're going to come to me for couples therapy, you've got to commit for a year. You've got to commit to 52 sessions. And then maybe you'll get somewhere. It may take less than that, but it's just what you said. You've got to get past that first. And you never do. I very seldom have gotten people past that ego. Sometimes they come in without it. But the people that have had affairs, generally it's very, very hard. The easier ones obviously are people that don't have those kinds of really serious betrayals and traumas in their relationship, and they can get their feet back under them.
This is why we see the big emergence of ketamine and MDMA assisted couples therapy, because what it does is it addresses that right up front. And it gets,
honestly, I've never even heard of that.
Particularly with MDMA, because it's an empathogen. What it does is that it just takes that ego part offline and it brings all that feeling, love, or function to the forefront. And for that brief moment, you can be in that place. Integration is difficult because, you can be in that place. I hear you. Oh my God, finally I understand, in a way that now that I'm no longer imprisoned in this default mode network. And to a certain extent, ketamine does that too, in a different way because it's a dissociative. But if you got to do the integration work, which is that you can't just have it happen in that one contained moment. You have to be able to work through what you learned and come back.
Right.
What's interesting about that work too is, and this is something that you were talking about James Hillman, that earlier before the podcast, the psychotherapy industry, man, holy shit! Because in my experience, couples do quite well without any mitigation. They have some source of the MDMA. They get the MDMA. They send the kids to grandma. They go off to an Airbnb. They spend a weekend together. And on the Saturday night, they receive the medicine and they talk. Sex is off the table. Most people don't want it on MDMA anyway. And they're just there and they listen to each other and they talk and they work through it. And sometimes you have to come back to that, as a practice every 6 months, every year, whatever. You don't need any facilitation.
No, you wouldn't.
No, because it's like, in fact, in a sense, under that level of the medicine, it's really hard to navigate. It's better that there is no.
Yeah, right. I mean, one of the primary things in couples therapy, at least in certain cognitive, almost all couples therapy is cognitive based, is the thing they call the couples dialogue, which essentially is doing, if you do it. And you do it properly, you're essentially doing what you just said. You're removing the ego part, the subjective reality part, and you replace that with curiosity, and you replace that with empathy and respect for the other person's reality. Right. And if people do it, it's fascinating to see how effective it is. But again, like with almost everything else in therapy, at least in my experience, I don't know, maybe because I'm a shitty therapist, but in my experience, compliance is very, very low. And in getting people, and in couples therapy, you need to have compliance because
they need to show up for the therapy. Yeah.
Huh?
You mean they need to show up for the therapy?
They show up for the therapy, but also do the homework. Actually do the work, because that's where the work happens. It's not in the session.
Yeah.
The work is at home when they're having a fight, and being able to slip out of complex and actually communicate with one another outside of the complex, which is what you're calling the ego, because the ego is a complex.
Do you find that putting those braces on of like the reflective listening pattern? Okay, so we've got a grievance here. I need to be heard for the next 3 minutes, and the timer is on, and then I need you to reflect back to me what you heard. And once I feel heard, and then I'm going to cede the floor to you, and you're going to have 3 minutes to speak to me. I'm going to reflect back once you feel heard. We're good, and it bypasses the ego, because I think that the back and forth in the conversation is. I need to feel heard by you,
right?
And I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get it. And but when you put the constraints on that, but here's the problem though. You can model that in session. You can explain that. You can sort of show that. But if you're not willing to, in that moment, let go of the ego, because you need to be right. You need to get
right.
Show you what you did to me and how you fucking hurt me and blah 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 blah.
Right.
Then all the tool is for nothing, and they come in the next week and they go, oh, well, it didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. Happens every time. I have one. I've had a couple of couples, I'm sure, that have done well, but I have one that I remember really well that did the couple, which is just what you just described. It's a couples dialogue. There's one other element that's put in after after the reflection. You validate. Yeah. And you make statements like, well, if that's the way you see it, I can see why you're angry. It always leads. Yeah, I hear you, and I can see why this would upset you, or whatever. I have one couple that I remember back in California who did this. They were very young, and they were just newly married, like for about a year, and they practiced it, and they did every day. And they came back and said this was a miracle. This completely changed everything, because we could have conversations without the complex. One of the other rules is that if you're the listener, you can't say anything except reflect. You can't say, well, that's not true. It was more like this. And, forget it. That's all that I'm right. And what you're saying is stupid and doesn't make any sense. And it's amazing how people do not do that ever when they're in argument with one another. They never do that. They always fight. And they've never had the experience of actually listening to one another. It's like totally new to them. They can be together for 30 years, and it's like we've never done anything that's even close to that.
Well, exactly, because the thing about like compliance requires a kind of level of obedience, and when you're both, in your immature, your child-to-child interactions. Disobedience is just too juicy. That trickster stuff there again, like defiance is like, no, fuck that. I'm not going to fuck, Todd's stupid, relational dialogue. I'm going to
right.
There's immature trickster energy in that. And it's like, the compliance and obedience kind of go hand in hand. And I think when you regress in those states, like obedience is like, you got to be kidding me. That's the last thing I'm looking for. I was thinking I went to this Chinese traditional medicine practitioner in Korea once, who apparently was like, he was the guy to go to. Everyone lineups at the door, and told me I had a cloud over my liver. And I'm like, wow, all right, rain clouds over my liver. But
that's good.
I asked him through my ex-wife translator, like, why do you think that Chinese medicine is like not accepted by the Westerners? Why is it like, these people all get it, Western people don't get it? He goes, they don't obey. They're fucking cowboys. Because you come to me and I say, stop drinking cold water, go to bed early, take these pills at exactly this time, and come and do this acupuncture, and then the thing will go away. And they go, yeah, sure. They do it for 1 week, and then they go, I didn't work.
Yeah.
Go, it didn't work. Well, did you keep drinking cold water? Yeah. Did you eat fatty foods or whatever I told you not to? Yeah, no, I did. Well, what the fuck? And it's like this Western cowboy, puer attitude of, Western American kind of minded people. Like it requires deference and obedience People go in to see those guys, and you shut the fuck up and listen, because this guy is the teacher. The word for teacher and doctor are the same thing. It's like, and you are in a reverent position. Now, let's not deify that or whatever, because that's a lot where abuse and incompetence will hide. But I think we have a lot to learn from that attitude of like, you actually have to be compliant to what the master is teaching you if you want to progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is a topic that you and I could probably talk about for 8 hours. I mean, in looking at reflecting with what's going on in the culture and right now with this belligerence of codifying information. This is disinformation. This is good information. This is not. I'm an expert. You're not an expert. Just on and on and on with that. And because there again is an assumption, I've said that maybe 500 times in this session, there's an assumption that someone that is the authority, like your Korean doctor, actually is a decent person and is not going to abuse his power and is not going to lead you astray for malicious purposes to make more money or to get you to do something for him. And that assumption of decency is something that if we were in a culture that was more focused on spirituality and more focused on lack of a better word, God, a higher power, whatever this metaphysical power that we're in, you could have decency. You could be a decent person, and you wouldn't have to constantly be checked out. Are you decent? Are you trustworthy? Are you a liar? I mean, we could go on and on.
Agree. No, and it's interesting. We're right back to that same thing with ego, right? Because what you could easily push back on is, okay, so for all the Western puers that don't reject obedience and are just like constantly defiant. Well, in their defense, we have a crisis of eldership. And like you say, when no one's showing up for that job, or if they do, you can't trust them because they're in it for the wrong reasons. No wonder your compliance and obedience is then a serious liability to you. So goes two ways. It's not just that the immature inability to be obedient, but it's the matures mature or elders, men and women unable to really steward that role in a healthy and whole way. And it's tragedy, really. I mean, that we're in that situation. And you're right. I think it brings into question even whether or not, like you were saying before off air, good leadership and kingship is really even feasible at this point. So it seems like the cards are so stacked against that it feels like it's impossible. I'm not so bleak. I think it is, but it's tough and it's rare. Especially if people don't think just on everyday way, think in these deeper ways of seeing things. We're talking about soul connection, and we're told again and again and again that soul doesn't exist, that there's no such thing as that, and maybe love doesn't even exist as love between partners. It's all about what you can get. I want a husband who's going to let me do whatever I want to do, who's going to let me express myself and follow my dreams. And the man says the same thing. It's like, I want a partner that, and it's like, okay, that's good in a certain way. But then there's also this I want to be what my partner desires. I want to be the person that fills his heart or her heart and makes them feel complete and makes them feel like they have found their soulmate and the love of their life. And there is a certain obligation and compliance to an idea about what that means that people seem to be much, much less willing to take. They feel like, well, this is about me. This is, what's important in my life. It's important that I be this way or that way. And there's no acceptance of, say, a differing subjective reality, a different masculine, feminine reality. And to just say, I'm going to listen to you when you tell me what is important to you. I'm going to listen to that. And I'm going to comply with that because I want you to be happy. And
I don't see that as on either side.
Well,
On either, I mean, this isn't just a man-woman thing.
No, well, it requires you to make a sacrifice for something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
exactly.
And I think that's the problem. Like we're right back to ego, you know, and the problems that lie within.
Now, since we're a ManTalk session, and we have to swear we know absolutely nothing about women, in order to get through this, because this
clear on that one a few episodes back, where I'm like, you got to be kidding me, because I have a feeling that a lot of women know more about me than I ever will. Because
I know.
And they've been putting up with men like me their whole fucking life.
That's right.
Like,
we have an insight. We have an insight to their workings that they don't have.
But I'm blessed with the capacity for reverence for the elder feminine, and I can be like, yeah, come on, tell me, I'm here, I'm for it. But
well, that's another thing, going off on a little bit of a tangent. I think men have a reverence for the feminine as embodied in a woman that women either they don't understand or they don't care about or whatever it might be. I think it's I mean, we're a bit of goofy when it comes to that we don't really see a lot of things that we probably should see and realize. But anyway, what I was going to say was this. Mm-hmm. The woman that did the clip we just saw is a woman, and she's talking to women saying, hey, women, you know, this is a double standard. You can't expect your man to do this, and then not comply with what he needs. So it's a lesson from her to the women. What is the lesson we can supply to the men that are experiencing this with their partner, that they are experiencing the partner not being as receptive or maybe even being rejective, but at the very least not supplying the sexual thing to connect with? You know, she says that the man will die inside. What can he do to keep that from happening?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I like to end on that, and just actually to tack that into something that you brought up that was really good earlier, which was about we've been told that soul doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Sure, by the scientific fundamentalists, sure. But we've also been told that soul is being carried in African American culture. They have soul food, soul music.
Oh, right.
You don't have it. They're going to carry it for you, and you should be thankful. So my suggestion would be first start right there. Don't ask other populations to hold your soul for you. And if you can't, if you haven't integrated your anima and you're looking for a woman to hold it for you, you're going to forever be in a place of incompleteness and wholeness. But what does that actually look like? I mean, I'll repeat what I said before. Men need to spend a lot of time and effort to become conscious, to work through their own shit, and to make a conscious and concerted effort to understand not just their partner, but the archetypal feminine and the female body that it lives in. Mm-hmm. And something as simple as there's a great book called Woman's Anatomy of Arousal, which is part science and part esoteric, wisdom, but also delivered in a very kind of palatable way. Start there. If you don't know female anatomy, if you don't know what a fallopian tube is, brother, you need to read that book.
Okay.
And if you have a wife who's in perimenopause, you need to understand the difference between estrogen and progesterone and androgen and testosterone. You need to know. There's in spiritual practice, there's a kind of reverence for like knowing the names of things, knowing the names of the gods. When we're doing like ecotherapy and connection to the plants, one of the most obvious things is that when you walk in the woods, in reverence for the trees and the plants and the four-legged ones and the more than human things around you, know their name. Mm-hmm. If you don't know a fucking poplar from a pine, you don't have enough reverence. Oh, whatever, it's that one. No. Learn the name.
Well, yeah, that's in the Bible.
Learn the name. It seems so basic and obvious, but it's
I think you're making a really, really important point, and it's biblical because there's whole section in the Bible about God naming things, and that whole process. You go, oh, what's this mean? This is no big deal. What does that mean? But it's just what you're saying. It's reverence, It's identifying the difference between this and that. It's even if you make up a name and it's not the name everybody else uses, you're still differentiating. So you're showing respect and reverence for the thing. I think that's a really, really good point.
But knowing the name in service of knowing the thing deeply. And you're right. Even if you don't know the name, if you say, and this is what a lot of indigenous traditions are about. Like, I'll do a little phenomenology on that tree. The aspen, the one that shimmers in the aspen light, beautiful, even better. Nietzsche would have a ball with that. It's like that idea of these like symbols that are like a coin with the embossing rubbed off. Like, we get, rather than the moon, the symbol of the moon impedes. Be with the thing in itself. Basically.
Yeah, the ancient Egyptians, a very interesting thing about them is just what you're saying, that the symbols they used, like for a bird, like for the particular bird, that the symbol was supposed to bring up everything about that bird. Yeah, in the season it was in, what it does in the spring, what it does in the the springtail is the one I'm thinking of, and it's a very interesting difference in that thinking, that there's a wholeness to it. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean,
no, that's a really good point.
The whole theory of like the minute that language became expressed through abstract sign, that Cartesian split was final.
Right.
Subject object. Like, I love that. I didn't know that about Egyptian hieroglyphs, but that's exactly right, because you still maintain the essence of the thing. I think even in Chinese too, right? Their basic sort of abstracted pictograms, but like a river still kind of looks like a river. It still evokes riverness within the soul.
Right.
Yeah, beautiful point.
No, it's this is. Are you familiar with the way the Superior Man, the David Dida book? Have we talked about that before? I always recommend that book for men. I think, there's a lot of stuff in it that's like, but it's still,
I don't know about that one.
You don't know about that one? Yeah.
Whenever I read it, and I'll be honest, I did not read it cover to cover because it kind of turned me off. I kept thinking like, what I want to know, David Dida. I want to know like your relationship history. I want to psychoanalyze you, because it feels like a little bit of projection going on, the feminine here.
Oh, I'm sure there is. I find it very an accessible book. I think for a lot of men that are dealing with what you're talking about, it's a little more esoteric to say that they don't have their feminine integrated or whatever they want. What the fuck does that mean?
He makes the point much clearer.
And he
with the bathwater.
He clarifies a lot of things that a lot of my male partners. Gee, was that a Freudian slip? My male clients have benefited from it. There's a lot in it that's just what you're saying as well. I think that men do, in this particular situation, do have to take on a responsibility for a wife who has not, I don't think it's fair for a man to just drop into, oh, she's going through menopause, so this doesn't have anything to do with how I treat her or how I relate to her. This is a physiological thing, and that's why she doesn't want to have sex. And if I explain that to her, and blah blah blah, and it isn't going to be just that. There's other, if that is the reason that a woman puts sex on the table or off the table, there's other stuff going on, and it may be very, very likely has a lot to do with him. It also could have a lot to do with her. No question, but in some cases, everything to do with her. But in some cases, and I would say more than some, it's his work that he has done just what you've done, what you've said, that it does not have a proper integration going on with the feminine, and when she pulls away, it's the end of the world for him, and he can't deal with it. He can't process it and whatnot. But along those lines, and I'd be curious to know what you would say to this. I think along the lines of the masculine not properly integrating the feminine, it seems, and this is kind of a weird thing to say, I'm not quite sure what you would think of it, but it seems that in the intimate relationship with the feminine, that's embodied in a woman, that he can't be fully integrated during that process, because he's actually physically integrating with the feminine. So on those moments, yes, when he's away from that, and she's, say, not sexual with him anymore, and he loses his cookies and whatnot, yes, there's a problem there.
Totally.
Okay, but while he's engaged in it, isn't that part of what is happening? That
100%.
she's physically okay.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is one of the interesting things about what's the connection between the trickster and the lover. Well, they're both boundary dissolvers. They're always on the boundary, and they're always dissolving it. The trickster doesn't want to respect the boundary because it's amoral. But for the lover, like you said, it's about dissolving those boundaries intentionally. Like I'm relaxing and surrendering my need to hold those boundaries in ego in order to allow you in.
Right.
But that's the mature function. So it requires an integrated sense of self, and to get the trickster out of the way. And by the way, I'll tattle on myself. When I was talking before about David Data, there's a trickster right there, which is that the infantile me goes, "Oh, fuck you, David Data. You think you know something? I'm gonna like puncture your pomposity with my takedown of you." And in doing so, I inadvertently kind of like, I want to take it back and be like, "Look, read the book. Don't listen to
right.
Take down. Just take it in, have reverence and trust. After the fact, you can come back and go, maybe there's a point here that we have to take." But yeah, I mean, really, you have to navigate the trickster and the lover from an awareness of the fact.
And to our listeners too, I mean, we talk a lot about a lot of things, and I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff that William talks about. I don't know what the fuck is going on. I mean, he's a lot smarter than I am in many, many, many ways. So I'm sure a lot of you out there are going, well, what are we supposed to be doing here? And I think it's safe to say, and William, disagree if I'm off with this, but I think it's safe to say that being a human being, you're in constant play with all of these energies and all of these things. And the best you can hope for is that you're conscious as much as possible of what's going on. And just like what you just said, I mean, you are conscious of the trickster coming up and essentially forcing you to say what you said.
Yeah,
that was the trickster. You were right. And if somebody as conscious as you're going to get hit with that. And I am obviously, I mean, I am constantly being hit by these things. And that's my whole life now, is struggling with all of these energies and powers and trying to stay as conscious as I can of them. And, you don't want to, I had a professor once at Pacifica say, the goal is not to be fully conscious. The archetypal systems that run in you are there for a reason, and the negative ones as well. And you're going to be as conscious as you are going to be. And, but that's the work, and it's constant. You're going to be constantly, you're not going to reach a point where, oh, no archetype affects me. There's no shadow in me at all. I've worked all through that. I'm done with it. I don't think that's going to happen.
Dangerous place to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, I'm always a little wary of anti-intellectualism, but I will break this down and make it as dead simple as possible. What to do, work on you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Do the work. And the work will come to you. You don't have to figure it out even. I mean, if you open yourself up and say, okay, I'm ready for the work, come to me, tell me what I need to do, it'll come to you. And you got to be open to it and ask it. You have to invite the work in. Huh?
Humbled.
Absolutely.
Look, it's going to happen one way or the other. Either you're going to humble yourself and receive the medicine, or you will be humiliated and it will be forced upon you.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good stuff.
Do yourself a favor and humble yourself and listen to the great masterful elders like Todd. With reverence.
Do you consider yourself an elder at your young age, William?
Well, it's not a title that you bestow upon yourself. It's one that the community lays upon you. But one of the things that they say is that if you've reached a certain mark of years in the body, you're there. I get it that eldership has to be earned, but for me, anyone who's had 40, 50, 60 years in an embodiment in this life, they probably have something to teach someone who hasn't got that number of, embodied mileage. So yeah, I mean, you said that to me once. I said, I'm a beginner in this, and you go, William, you got to be kidding me. I was like 40 then. You're like, you got 40 years of this. And I'm like, I've been a therapist for 3 years. You're like, yeah, but you have 40 years of experience living as a human being.
Well, I see you as an elder.
Well, thank you.
I do, and even to me, because obviously I'm older than you, but that doesn't mean that you're not elder to me.
Well, an enormous compliment.
Well, thank you. It's well intended. Okay. So that was fun. All right, everybody. So we'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed our little wrap. And please comment. That's really important to us. And let us know what you think of what we're doing. Or thank us or whatever, or tell us we're idiots. Whatever you want to do is fine. And subscribe, please. And just keep in touch. And we'll see you the next time around.
Take care, everyone.
Okay, let me see if I can press the right button here. Here we go.